All right. Good morning, everybody. So I was taking a drive through the countryside, and I thought that whenever I think of the hills and the plains where they have these battles outside of Harosheth or inland Canaan, I was driving in that area, and I decided to pull off side of the road and read the next chapters right here because we know we're in Tyre right now. Not right now, but in the book we're in Tyre, and we're leaving Tyre. If you remember, Uriah and Moses just had a nice talk with the Lady Maris, who realized and recognized Moses as the one true or the true Pharaoh of Egypt. So she had changed her mind, and she forbid Mehitabel to marry Achil, which is a good thing, but a scary thing because, they need to run away and get away from Achil. All right, and so that's where we are, and we're going to see what Uriah ends up doing next with Moses and Mehitabel. All right, so let's get started on this. We're going to do two chapters, 25 and 26. And 25 is called Pelops. Pelops, if you remember, is the dog, Achilles' dog. He's kind of a mean, scary, vicious dog. All right, so 25, Pelops. The sun was low when we were ready to leave. Mehitabel had made many preparations and gathered together many belongings. And when I saw what she had, I told her she must leave them. But my jewels, she cried, are people to take me for a slave? Besides, many of them are sacred. And how can I leave my household images? And what am I to do without my curling pins? And no one will know me without the paints for my mouth and eyes. She wants to bring makeup out to Harosheth. Bad idea. And all those things. Jotham will know you if he still lives, I replied firmly. Do you want to draw down robbers? Besides, who do you think will carry them for you? My porters, said Mehitabel grandly. So I explained to her as patiently as I could that she could bring only one woman servant with her, and that we would have a hard time feeding that one, and that we had better save our strength for walking, not carrying heavy bundles. Mehitabel listened, frowning, but she was the daughter of Ethbal and could always understand good sense. She chose the little flute player to take along with her, Achil having sold away the old nurse whom she loved. The flute player wept for joy, being in such fear of Achil and his man, the Cretan Deucalion. At last we were ready. The sun was down, and we were in a fever to be out of the house before Achil returned. And yet Mehitabel lingered in the hallway, looking about at the bright hangings and rich rugs, the dainty ornaments and colored tiles, with eyes full of tears. Come, I said to her, and I said as my father had once said to me, it is not your home. It is their home now. At last we were in the street, and there suddenly Mehitabel stopped. Zebub, she cried. She had turned very pale. I had forgotten him. Zebub was the Egyptian fox dog. As she turned, and I saw that she was ready to go back inside the house. It is too late, I hissed at her. Any minute now, Achil will come around that corner with Deucalion, and then what? Mehitabel faced me, white and stubborn. Achil will kill him, she said. He will drown him or set Pelops upon him. If you want to go without me, go, but I am going back for Zebub. I could not let her go back. I had promised Hannibal and the Lady Maris. Wait here, I said. Moses, keep Mehitabel out of sight. And to Mehitabel I added bitterly, and if I am slain in the house of your father, it will be on your head. You will find him on the roof, in the summer parlor, was all Mehitabel replied. I moved as fast as I dared, yet silently too, for all I knew Achil might already have come into the house, but I saw no one in the entryway or on the stairs. and I ran up them, leaping two at a time so that I was breathless when I came to the roof. Zebub, as Mehitabel had said, was in the summer parlor snoring on a cushion. I seized him. He did not like to be wakened so rudely and tried to bite me. I stuffed him under one arm and hastened out onto the open roof and toward the stairs. Barbarian! Shouted a voice behind me. I whirled to face Akil, backed by his man Deucalion. They had been in the house, after all, and had followed me up the stairs. I dropped the little dog, and waiting for what would come, the two men came toward me. You did not listen to me. You came back, said Akil. You came back to steal. A thief in the night may be slain with no questions asked. Deucalion. Moving faster than a snake, the Cretan got behind me and seized my arms. As I stood as my father had once stood, pinned and helpless, and the blue-eyed man came toward me, balancing his stick in both hands. But I was not my father. I was young and strong and well-fed, and unlike him, I did not want to die. Besides this, I had learned things in my training outside Harosheth, and suddenly I bent and twisted, and the Cretan was no longer holding my arms, but was lying flat on the roof. He had cracked his head on the stone. Whether or not he was dead, I did not know, but surely he would not hurt or frighten people for a long time to come. Akil stood still a moment in amazement. And this gave me my chance to spring upon him and get hold of the stick. We wrestled for it, close together. I saw only his eyes, blazing blue eyes, the eyes of the man who had slain my father. Suddenly the stick flew from our hands, clattering along toward the edge of the roof. I reeled from the surprise. Akil was still stronger than I. Before I could find my balance, he had borne me down on the stones. His hands were around my neck, his fingers digging into my throat. There were red waves in the air before me. My head and my neck and my chest were bursting, but I could still see those blue eyes. I went for them with my thumbs. Over the roaring in my ears, I heard him yell. The fingers loosened and grabbed my wrists, and the air with great pain rushed back into my chest. I rolled and twisted to get free of him, using my knees and feet. He fell away from me for a moment, and I struggled up, holding on to the parapet at the edge of the roof. In an instant, he too was on his feet and coming upon me again. With a sickening fear, I knew what he would do, that he would force me over the edge. I staggered away from the parapet. He sprang after me, and in that instant, a brown body hurtled through the air, just missing me and landing instead full upon the shoulders of Akil. I saw the Philistine reel and heard him scream, and then I saw him topple crazily over the edge and into the courtyard below. The dog Pelops stood, his forefeet resting on the parapet, and after a moment, he began to howl. Akil's shout had brought him. It was I he had meant to spring upon. For a moment, I watched him in a kind of horror. Then, stepping over to Deucalion, who was breathing with a rasping sound, I gathered up Zebub, who had watched it all with great interest, yapping with excitement. I tucked him again under my arm and, gasping the air back into me, ran down the stairs and into the street. Amosis and Mehitabel and the flute player were waiting around the corner. Mehitabel's eyes widened when she saw me, but I thrust the foxdog into her arms, and it was a long time before I would speak to her again, after all she had put me through. Akil is dead, said Amosis. He seemed to know things without being told. I nodded. It was still hard for me to breathe. We must be out of the city before they find him, said Amosis. We looked at Mehitabel. She was safe now, from the threat of a kill. Her wealth might keep her safe from those others of his kind. No one would accuse her of the murder of the Philistine. With us, who knew what might lie ahead? They're saying that she could stay. It might be safe for her to stay. Moses too was thinking this. He said to her, "Will you still come?" She looked around her, and I knew the thought again of her gods and her possessions and the great terrifying unknown that lay before her if she left them. But perhaps she thought of her kinsmen and her people and her priests bowing their heads before all those others like a kill. Perhaps she thought of all those children dead in useless sacrifice, and of her brother who had wanted to die. And I know she thought of Jotham. She said, "I am coming." We made our way to the city gate. The guard would have stopped and questioned us, but a bar of silver quieted him. Soon we were out of the city, onto the causeway, and finally on the mainland itself. I looked back at the walls of the town, gleaming pale in the moonlight. Tyre will be a great city one day, I thought to myself, greater than Sidon. She will never risk her treasure, and the mighty and the powerful will always be her friends. But I was glad that we had made a different choice. Chapter 26, Harosheth again. So they're on their way to Harosheth. The highway was crowded once more, but this time the caravans were different. Many of them were straggling bands of refugees from the north, where the sea people had been at their work of plunder and burning. The people were of all kinds, from slaves to princes. Some of them were richly dressed, and some had already walked their finery into rags. Some carried heavy bundles of possessions and clung to them still, though they would soon fall by the way from weariness. When the sun rose pink on the dust of the road, we fell in with a band of men and women and children from Sidon. From one man I bought a donkey for Mehitabel to ride, but the little flute player was so young and tired that Mehitabel put her on its back first, a while to regain her strength. Well, that was nice. That was decent. I was surprised, for she had never before given much thought to the feelings of slaves. Perhaps I thought it was because she had come close to being one herself. The man had not wanted to sell his beast at first, but had finally agreed. "Surely I have no use for silver on this road," he said. "Still, it may be useful where we are going." "Where are you going?" "Into the hills," he replied, "as far from the coast as I can get." "Have you not heard," I asked him, "that the cities in the hills have been taken by the tribesmen?" The man shrugged hopelessly. "Whoever they are," he said, "they can be no worse than the sea people." Suddenly his shoulders shook with sobs. "Sidon," he cried, "my beautiful Sidon, the queen of the seas. They have slain her elders and the great one, and have burned their houses. Their soldiers stand on the corners and cut down all who pass by, just for the sport. Why did we stand against them?" Saddened, I left him to his grief. Then I saw that Moses was standing by the side of the road, apart from the others. "Hurry," I said to him. "We must keep up with the rest. Stragglers will only bring down thieves." "I am not going with you," said Moses. I could not believe I had heard him right. "I must leave you here," he said again. "You are going inland. I must take the road to the south." "But why?" I protested. "The Philistines will be in all the coast cities soon. What is in the south?" "Egypt," replied Moses. "Egypt?" I echoed. "You said you would never go back." "Yes, I said that," said Moses. "But have you ever been to the country near the mouth of the Nile?" Have you ever gone fishing in the marshes in a little boat, or hunted in the reeds along the bank, or buried your feet in the black mud? You think Atusas was a great city, or even Tyre, but have you ever been to Memphis? The avenues there are lined with trees, and the images of the kings are as big as the greatest of the great houses. And it is like hearing music to look out from a rooftop out across the gardens and the river toward the desert. I looked at him helplessly, not knowing what to say. Let him go, said Mehetabel. Adani has called him back to Egypt. We must go where the gods lead us. You worship a god? You worship Adani? I asked him wonderingly. I have never seen you bow before an image. The light of the sun is his image, said Ahmosis. The sun shines on all men, even the Philistines, and so does Atan. But sometimes he must choose among them, and so must I. Sooner or later the gods lead us home. How will you live along the way? I asked him. And then I urged, divide the silver. It is half yours. Part of it was your ransom. But Ahmosis shook his head. It was you who won it from the pirate, he said. I have no need of it. Just give me my share of the food, to last me till I come upon with some Egyptian garrison. He paused. Will you not come with me? The Hebrews will be at Harosheth. But can you be sure Mehetabel's kinsmen will be among them? And will they not kill you? It came to me that they very probably might, but I knew I must find out what had become of Sisera and his mother, for I had given my promise, and something else drew me toward Harosheth. For a long time he and I looked at each other. I had first seen him only a moon or so before, yet I could not believe I would never see him again. We embraced, and I watched him out of sight down the highway, the true king of Egypt, who had been the truest friend I had ever known. May your God be with you, I called after him, though I did not know why, for I no longer worshipped any gods. Remember, grew up hating Egyptians, and now the best friend he's ever had was an Egyptian. And so, with the footsore band of Sidonians, Mehetabel and the flute player and I continued on toward Harosheth. In the middle of the second day we came upon it, and I saw the dark walls as I had seen them for the first time that day when I had been dragged along by the Canaanite soldiers with a rope around my neck. But today, smoke rose from within those walls, and I knew that Harosheth had been taken and put to the torch. Outside the smoking walls was a great encampment. I caught my breath to see it, for it seemed that it must be the encampment of Sisera, where I had trained and had ridden Labernash. There were the fine tents of the captains of 1,000, and that I had envied so, and towering above the rest, the many-colored tent of Sisera. Chariots were ranged beneath an awning, and horses tethered in a compound. I felt as if I were in a dream. But when we came closer, I saw that the masters of these tents and chariots were not the smart captains and well-trained troops of Canaan. They were a strange mingling of men and women and children of all kinds, from sober herdsmen and craftsmen to proud chiefs and fierce-eyed savages. They were clothed in all manner of garments, from rags to shining captured Canaanite breastplates and linens. They came to stare at us when we came in sight, and to listen in wonder to the tale of the Sidonians. They gave us leave to camp not far from their tents. They traded food to the Sidonians in return for silver and fine garments and precious ornaments. And it was strange to look upon rough, bearded, half-naked men, now weighted down with jeweled pendants or gleaming armbands, while the former owners gnawed eagerly on a hunk of bread or an onion. An old woman let us share her tent, and the Hittabel, who had never waited on anyone before, now set herself to carry water and start a fire. I was amazed at how well she did. The little flute player was far slower at it than her mistress, but I could see that the eyes of the Canaanite girl were perplexed and frightened at their first glimpse of this new life, and a great misgiving came over me. What have I done? I thought. To what have I brought her? Would Hannibal thank me for this? I left the tent and looked out to the camp of the Hebrews. My flesh crept at the thought of making myself known to them. Will they not kill you? Moses had said. Some children of the tribesmen had come in curiosity to poke about the camp of the Sidonians. One of them, a brown, tough-looking little fellow, had seen me and was staring at me with solemn eyes. He came toward me slowly. Uriah Tarhunt, he said. How do you know my name? I asked him. Then I saw who it was. It was Jabin, the pale, perfumed little lamb of Moloch, that I had first seen glittering with ornaments on the waterfront at Tyre. Now he was roughly clad and hard and sure on his feet, and might have been a different child altogether. I put my hands on his shoulders and arms to feel his muscles and ran them over his curly hair. They have fed you well enough, I said. Have they treated you well too? They are good to me, as no one before, said Jabin. They let me go out with the sheep and play with the animals, and they have taught me to use a sling and a stone, and Tamar tells me stories. My heart jumped. Is Tamar well? I asked him. She is well, said Jabin, but she doesn't smile much, and she never talks of you. His eyes were sober still, and I thought a little scared. I drew in my breath and asked the question I had been afraid of. Did Jotham ben Amram live through the battle? His eyes brightened. Yes, and he is a hero, he said proudly. He killed the black man, the charioteer of Sisera. And he would have slain Sisera himself, but then when Sisera saw that the black man was dead, he turned coward and came down from his chariot and ran. What became of him? I asked with a heavy heart. They say he is dead, but I am not sure how. And before they burned the city, they went to the great house to save his mother, for she was an old woman, but she was gone. Some say the slaves rose up and killed her, but some say she was slipped out of the city and taken to Carchemish, the Hittite town in Ammon. I hope that this last was true. In any case, I was freed of my promise concerning her, and now I turned my mind to the other thing I had to do. I said to Jabin, Go tell Jotham ben Amram. Tell him that I am here. Tell him I have brought him a gift. The scared look came back to Jabin's eyes. Must I tell him? He said. They say you are an enemy of Israel. I would not like to see you killed, Uriah Tarhunt. Jotham will not kill me, I said. Somehow I was sure of that. Give him my message, Jabin. He will thank you for it. After Jabin had left, I stood a while outside the tent. The other Hebrew children lingered about, and I saw them whispering and giggling and pointing toward me. One of them came forward, pushed by the others. Are you a Sidonian? He whispered. No, I replied. But you are an enemy of our God, called another from in back of the group. They all giggled nervously. I am an enemy of no God, I assured them. Our God is the enemy of all the others, said one boldly, and he has overthrown them. Where is he, your God? I asked them. There on that high place, in that tent. That is finer even than the tent of Sisera. And the first child, said the first child, they brought him up to be with us. in this battle. I looked where he pointed. It was indeed a mighty tabernacle that stood on a hill outside the camp. I would love to see him, I said suddenly. You cannot see him, said the child, looking shocked. He lives in a wooden box covered with gold. They call it the Ark of the Covenant, and no one may touch it on pain of being cursed. I could not take my eyes from the tent. Their God was in there. He had sent Deborah her visions and the rains that had destroyed the army of Sisera. The image must be in the box, I told myself. I would like to see it. We sat that night. We sat that night, the old woman, Mehitabel, the flute player, and I, about the common dish in the tent. Mehitabel's eyes were upon me throughout the meal with sober questioning, but I could not bring myself to meet them. Toward the end of the evening, I heard steps outside the tent. I sprang to my feet, meaning to meet him outside. But then I saw Mehitabel's face, pale and scared, saw that she had already guessed who it was and that she was as fearful as I was. He pushed through the opening of the tent and stood in the firelight in gleaming captured armor, his hair falling rough and untended about his sun-darkened face. His feet were bound with rags, his hands hardened and rough. Never again would I think it strange to see him, a lord of Tyre, in the tents of the shepherds. He was wholly a tribesman now. My heart sank for Mehitabel's sake. His eyes were upon me, dark and angry. Then suddenly they changed, and a look of wonder, almost of fear, came into them, for Mehitabel had risen behind me, and he had seen her. I saw him look down at his rough clothes and broken fingernails, saw him smooth back his hair with a humble, frightened gesture and raise his eyes fearfully to hers. I saw the color come back to her face, and I then saw her smile. Then they moved faster than I would have thought possible, and their hands were clasped together as if nothing could ever loosen them. Neither of them looked at me. I made up my mind. I would not spoil this happiness I had given them. I would put no burden of choice concerning my life or death on Jotham's shoulders. When I walked out of the tent, they did not even see me go. What do you think Uriah is going to do now? So Jotham and Mehitabel are together, and now Uriah is not going to burden Jotham with a decision to either kill Uriah or let him live. So Uriah is going to do something. Is he just going to leave? Is he going to go away? Is he going to go see somebody else? All right. Well, anyway, there's that. We'll find out what happens. It's as far as the love story between Jotham and Mehitabel is concerned, that's been settled. They're together now, and they're happy. Now we'll find out what will happen to Uriah. All right. And you saw what happened to Jabin. Jabin is he's a young kid that's part of the tribe, part of the Hebrews, and loves it. All right. So we will talk to you tomorrow, guys. Take care. I got to get in my car and move on. All right. Bye-bye.